To begin.
Are you watching closely?
To begin.
Clytus, I'm bored.
How to start.
What plaything can you offer me today?
Welcome to the first syllable. Here's a little thing. I've been trying to figure out a schedule for recording this and recording the Groundhog Day Project Minute by Minute, which are going to be my two shows for a little while. They both come out on Friday. This show's now coming out at 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. Pacific. And so it comes out before Groundhog Day, and so I'm like, I could use that, always record it first, and they could tie together potentially, depending on what I'm thinking about or talking about. Except, I'm recording early, so there's not much of an update. Last week's episode hasn't even come out yet, and it's still week 1 of the spring semester for me. I am not working on a new project yet, but I think it's going to be death still. The weird thing is, the thing I've been thinking about, and I had this problem in the fall, is Choose 2 Rabbits. In the fall, the problem was I was kind of for a few months thinking about death, and Four Finger Discount. And then right when I was like, okay, as soon as winter break starts, I'm going to work on death. As soon as I made the decision, Four Finger Discount was all I could think about. And I think it's happening again. I think right as I'm getting it in my head that I'm going to be working on death next week, instead, Choose 2 Rabbits is all I can think about. I even started reading Raymond Chandler's The Big Sleep a couple nights ago because I'm trying to get an idea of how I want it to feel and sound. So my update for now, which might end up being scrapped, well, not scrapped, it'll come later, is for Choose 2 Rabbits. Even though death might be what I'm working on next time you hear from me. Who knows? I want to tell you about Lee of Air. Lee, our main character, our detective, our hard-boiled detective, as it were, because that's what I want to do with the fantasy world of Basara, is use it to tell different kinds of stories. I've told horror stories, I've told a sort of science fiction story. The story I just finished, Four Finger Discount, is partly a sort of coming-of-age story, even though the main character is 19, but she's sort of at the point where she's finding her independence and finding her own way. It's also, structurally, a heist story. You know, bringing the crew together with different skill sets and all that, and then they have a heist that has a couple stages to it. Each stage has some problems, and, well, I won't spoil it much, but Choose 2 Rabbits is a murder mystery and sort of a conspiracy, but it also is my way of continuing the story in the city of Aedith, even though the characters from Four Finger Discount left Aedith at the end of their story. They are now on a completely different continent, living in a little town called Two Rocks. So in Aedith, meanwhile, there's a murder conspiracy. I won't get into the details of that right now. I just wanted to tell you about Lee. Because Lee was conceived of as a character potentially kind of like Odds and Kill were in the previous story, potentially for me to play in a role-playing game. Kill was made for Dungeons & Dragons many years ago now. Odds was a few years more recently. It was after the pandemic for sure. I'd have to double check what year. Because she wasn't for Dungeons & Dragons. She was actually conceived of for a Tales from the Loop game that I was going to have the chance to play on someone else's Twitch stream. But then he hadn't actually run a Tales from the Loop game before, and so the first set of players he had took longer than he expected, and so he never actually got to any of the other groups. I was in group 2. If he does that again, cool. I would love to do it. I don't think he listens to the show, but he does follow me on Twitter on Blue Sky. Hell, he's the reason I'm on Blue Sky. He got me the ad code. Anyway, Lee was conceived of as a Dungeons & Dragons character. And in particular, a character to play as sort of a joke. I had this other character called If, who was a kobold, who his backstory was that he didn't really know who he was. If isn't even his name. He's very indecisive. He's very curious. And he was supposed to be a funny chaos sort of character. But then the one time I got to play If was in an ongoing campaign that a friend of mine's running that is more combat oriented. And If is much more role-playing oriented, as a lot of my characters often are. Even Kill, while he would work well in a combat-oriented game, because he was a half-orc barbarian, he also had serious backstory and personality thing that was more of who he was and made him a role-playing character for me, because that's how I come up with the characters in the first place. Is what are they like as a person? And then what class and background and everything fits them sometimes fits them poorly, deliberately, like Kill. Kill was a barbarian because he had grown up at war, but that wasn't what he likes. And in Four Finger Discount, it's not what he likes. He's good at hurting things, and he's been working for, essentially as a enforcer for a crime boss after being a soldier. But he doesn't particularly like it. He likes to read, he likes to cook. And if I get around to the sequel to Four Finger Discount, he and Soraya are opening a restaurant in the town of Two Rocks, and it's part of the plot for that one. Is that them opening this new restaurant affects supply lines, which disrupts local power structures, and a whole complicated thing. Lee, on the other hand, Lee Aver, if you know French, you might get the pun. I forget the specifics. I didn't bring them up on my screen. Lee Aver is a combination of the French words, I believe, for rabbit and for drunk. He was going to be, mechanically, he was going to be a drunken master monk, but also maybe with some rogue levels. I forget whether I statted him past level 1 or not. But in concept, he was what if Eddie Valiant and Roger Rabbit were combined. And so I wanted him personality-wise to be a bit like Roger Rabbit or Bugs Bunny. Specifically, he was a, Harangon in terms of race. So he looks like a rabbit. And he was supposed to be sarcastic and funny, but also a hard-boiled detective with a tragic backstory. And he deals with his tragic backstory by drinking a lot and joking a lot. When I decided to bring him over to Basara, his race no longer fit. There's no rabbit race in Basara. Basara is less interesting when it comes to the races options. There are a few major race groups. The Weg, the Vani, the Trow, and Haman, humans. The Duero, which are dwarves. The Trow are kind of like elves, elf-ish. The Vani are aquatic, and the Weg include goblins and orcs, essentially. He can't be any of those because I still liked him to be the rabbit, and so the concept for Lee in the new version is that he didn't used to be alive. And he's got a sort of Pinocchio backstory in a way. A sort of mad scientist wizard brought a rabbit puppet to life. And that's where Lee comes from. And because then he got lost, I don't know the details yet because I haven't, written that part of the story. And it might not be part of the story, Choose Two Rabbits, I don't know. He got separated from his maker and got lost, and in trying to investigate and find his maker again, and maybe he found him, I don't know, he really got good at investigation, and so he is working in the city of Aedith as a unique being, the only one of his kind. A bit like, if you ever read Astro City, there was an issue about a cartoon lion, I believe he was a lion, who some kid's wish or something brought him to life, and it was a comedic story until, then he's just gotta live. So he opens a bar. And he's just a cartoon lion who's alive. Lee is kind of like that. He is a anthropomorphized rabbit who's a bit of Pinocchio / Frankenstein, who I want to write as being a smartass. And I kind of like the idea of Philip Marlowe because he's deadpan more than openly sarcastic and witty. And I feel like Lee might be our narrator. And then the story will work really nicely. And I want to treat it a bit like Chandler with the short sentences and the detailed descriptions of locations and characters. And Lee is a puppet, so he's not that big, so I don't know. It might be fitting if he talks about, people's legs like a hard-boiled detective might, calling them gams, stems. Although what's he into? I don't know. He's not anatomically correct, so maybe that frustrates him. Stuff to think about. But I know the murder mystery is going to get involved with a larger conspiracy around the city and possibly around the whole world and tie into an ongoing storyline that I already know what's happening in the larger political power structures of Olgardia, Eleuthea, and Basara. For those not keeping up, Aedith is the city, Olgardia is the kingdom, Eleuthea is the continent, Basara is the planet. So, yeah, that's in my head right now. So I don't know if I'm going to be writing death next week or when this comes out this week. So I guess you'll find out next week what I'm working on. What I need to do is deliberately open up my notes for Death, and start thinking about it, because I already have the names and descriptions for my 15 characters. Or 16 if you count the killer. Interrupting really quick because, well, you'll find out next week. It was 19 characters. I was counting them wrong. Whew, and that's a lot. But progress has been made. More next week. Back to last week. Or a few days ago. And I just have to figure out how they sort of tie together and don't tie together in a way because of the story structure. If you've been following the show, you'll understand why that could be complicated. I won't get into it again, because too many spoilers is too many spoilers. Anyway, if you happen to be listening to this right when the episode came out, Groundhog Day Project Minute by Minute, Minute 2 will be coming out in a little less than an hour. Actually, that's not true. Minute 2 is not coming out today, because of the new format of that show. Coming out today is going to be 3 bonus episodes of me reading 3 different entries from the original blog from a decade ago. Minute 2 won't come out till next week.
Cut. You're still here? It's over.
Stuff that dreams are made of.
It's a passport
Go home.
to another world.
Go.